Hello my friends, blackendrose here, and today we're here with another installment of Let's Talk. This time on the backdrop of one of my old Tech It Minecraft clips. So sit back and enjoy. I have two subjects today. One is stress. The other is what makes good horror in a horror game. Okay, so let's get started first with stress. Well, I should think we all know what stress is. That thing that builds up constantly when we're under pressure, upset or angered. Well, I actually looked this up at one point. Around to the NHS website. Apparently, stress can be described as a hormone, i.e. a chemical that is produced in the body. Now here's the interesting bit. Stress is actually a form of... It's a kind of chemical that develops in the same sort of way adrenaline does. It's the fight or flight mentality. However, because we are not performing any exercise action, that stress hormone then builds up, which then causes side effects, some of which you may already know very well. However, apparently these side effects for stress can actually mimic the symptoms of almost every disease out there. And that's why sometimes stress can be a major contributing factor to getting ill, or feeling ill, run down, or any of the above. Now, interestingly enough, the stress hormone is broken down or assisted in being broken down by adrenaline. And as you know, adrenaline is caused when you get excited or are performing exercise or exercise-like actions. And I'm not going to go into the humour of how that sounded, because that's just dirty-minded. What are you doing here? Go away. No, in fact, no, come back. Don't leave me. I've got no one to talk to. But back to the serious stuff. Interestingly enough, stress can be handled in a number of ways. Now, before I go into it, I don't have a miracle cure-all for stress, depression or anxiety or any of that, nor am I going to claim that I can peddle it. All I have is what I've read and what I've experienced myself over the years. And it makes me sound old when I say that, and I'm not entirely old. But anyway, whatever I come out with in these Let's Talks, just bear in mind that this is only just me talking. This is not me telling you to do stuff. If anything that I say here it proves useful, bonus. If you don't believe it, then I have no problem. Everyone generates their own opinions. But anyway, on to the subject at hand. Coping with stress generally falls down to some interesting factors. Firstly, identifying the cause of your stress. That one sometimes requires a bit of soul searching to try and think about the things that are actually making you stressed, anxious, depressed, angry, and things like that. Have a think about what is causing your stress. It can literally be anything, large or small. Nothing's too small to cause you stress. It could even literally be an untidy room, or it could be something much bigger, much smaller. At the end of the day, stress is generated by a lot of things depending on what makes us anxious. Once you've identified what causes you stress, then you can start working towards it. Identifying stress and then dealing with the root cause is generally the main way to help with dealing with stress. Now the interesting bit is stress. The stress hormone can be broken. It helps break. Start again. The stress hormone is better broken down by adrenaline. So, things that release adrenaline, such as exercise, or sometimes enjoyable things like a good laugh or something, that can sometimes trigger adrenaline, and that can help with dealing with stress you can't. Lingering stress, or just trying to improve the mood a bit, like just exerting yourself slightly. Now, obviously, it's not going to cure things. it's not a miracle cure-all for stress, but generally identifying the cause, addressing the cause, or removing yourself from the cause, or removing the cause itself, and then just taking time and chilling in whichever way you enjoy. It's similar to how I suggested dealing with depression, and essentially the biggest factor in all of it, and I can see the Minecraft is lagging horribly here, I'll have to do something about that later, but addressing the issue is the biggest one, and then giving yourself time to recover. Like all things, the things that cause stress is like the things that cause injury. You need time to heal afterwards. Okay, let me know what you think about that. At the end of the day, these are just my views and opinions. May they help you, and if they don't, then I would suggest seeing what's out there and just talking to people. Sometimes it's one great way of helping is talking to people you can trust. Okay, and now we will move on to my second subject, which will be horror in video games, or should I say, what makes good horror in video games. But before I go into that, how about breaking up the two subjects with a bit of laughter? Now, I must warn you, those of a nervous disposition should probably turn their sound down a little bit and move away from the screen. Those without a nervous disposition continue on, and those still on the waiting list, well, you decide for yourself. Enjoy! I hope you guys are still here after that. I apologise for if I made anyone jump with that. This was something I found while trawling the net one time. Anyways, that leads me nicely into horror in video games. Now, many horror titles have crossed my table, and you've seen a number of them that I have recorded and played. But what actually makes a good horror game? Good horror moments in a horror game? Well, people may say something that scares you, something that makes you jump, something that makes you afraid, anxious. But what causes that? I mean, there's jump scares, there's atmospheric fear, there's monsters. But the thing is, what I've come to learn over the years, and from numerous gameplays, is that you can throw jump scares in a game, you can throw loud noises into a game, you can throw uneasy noises into a game, but just throwing them in on their own doesn't work. You can't just throw a bunch of ingredients into a pot and expect a MasterChef masterpiece afterwards. It just doesn't happen. You have to very carefully decide what you're going to do and when you're going to do it and how you're going to apply it. Now, some games I've played or seen have done it really well. Other ones I've played and seen have done it very poorly, even using the same tactics. Generally, setting up first, in my opinion, you have to set up a good atmosphere. A good basis for a horror game is setting up the atmosphere, and that can generally come from very little. Just a good backdrop, sometimes some ambient sound, and not necessarily actually seeing any monsters. Sometimes seeing hints of monsters, but not actually seeing any, because that builds up anxiety and the feeling of you being watched. However, on its own, that's not enough, because you can keep that going for a long time, but eventually the effect wears off. There's no threat, there's no tangible thing to be associated with that atmosphere. And that's where you come into the aspect of a threat, a monster. Essentially, you need to have something to be afraid of, not just being afraid for the sake of being afraid, because that just doesn't work. You need to be afraid of something, and that's the stage where you have to start bringing in hints of something that is a threat, something that can hurt you, and something that can kill you, and that's what generates the threat. After that, it's then if you've done that right, then you've probably got your audience hooked. You've generated a good atmosphere, a good setting, You've made people anxious, and now you've shown them what the threat is. Then it's the stage to start working on that threat. When you've got someone feared up like that, sometimes jump scares will then work quite well if you do them properly. You can't just throw things in people's face and then say it's a jump scare, be afraid, because that's what's called cheap jump scares. I don't obviously know the best way to do horror or the best way to do jump scares. This is just based on my opinion, but I find the best jump scares come when you least expect them, but also when you anticipate them. So, if you throw a jump scare very randomly at someone, it's a cheap jump scare. If you throw a jump scare at someone who is afraid and is kind of expecting something, then that hits them hard without it being cheap. Because people see it, they don't exactly see it coming, but they expect something to happen. And that's when you can hit them. Or you get people hooked in, make them think a scare is coming, then not scare them. Because then, once you've not scared them, they think that the threat has gone, or there isn't going to be one. Then you hit them with the scare. At that point, you've hit them with maximum effect, because they were expecting it, then not expecting it, and then been hit with it. Now, obviously, you have to have threat in a horror game. Otherwise, it's just ambient. It's just ambient horror. There is no threat. Take Amnesia, for example. You don't see monsters very often in it, but when they do arrive, they are a threat, and they will hurt you, and they will hurt you a lot. And that kind of threat makes you even more afraid, because the thing that's after you, you can see it, and it can hurt you. And then that's what generates threat and real terror. When you know something is coming after you, and it can hurt you. Now, as far as actual gameplay goes, that can vary. Amnesia did it right. You had no ability to defend yourself, so you just had to run. And that is a really good horror concept in my opinion. Because being able to just wipe out the enemy removes it from the horror and turns it more into a shooter. Now, being able to get away from the threat is obviously important. Being able to hide from the threat is important. You can't just throw bullshittiness at someone and say, here's a monster, it's going to kill you, but you can't do anything about it. That's bullshittiness. And then that sort of detracts people from the horror and just turns it into a grind. And that's my opinion, really. To make good horror, you need to set it up, and you need to make all the ingredients work properly. It's difficult to do it without focusing on one key area, and some games have done it right, some have done it wrong. I mean, Nightmare Simulator, I feel, did it wrong. That was a shooter. There was also another one I tried that just threw loud noises at me. That didn't work. However, Slender made it work. You didn't see it to begin with, the ambient sound worked it in, and then you started to see him. Distant, but you could see him. And then he turned up, and then he could come and get you. That worked well, and it was random. You didn't know where he was going to pop up. And that didn't throw jump scares at you very often, except for the staticky thing. And there you go. Those are my two subjects for today. And thank you for sitting with me for this Let's Talk. Now, I want to try and make Let's Talk a regular feature on my channel, but I'm going to need your help on this one, because I'm going to need some subjects to talk about on Let's Talk. It can be pretty much anything. Doesn't have to be games. It can be something outside, but there will be some subjects I won't talk about, and they will be very delicate ones, or very like nasty ones. But you'll know that when it comes about. If you want me to discuss a particular subject, leave a note in the comments below, or inbox me if you don't want people to know that you're the one who suggested it. So that's entirely up to you. And I hope we can make this a regular thing. I am not a font of knowledge. I am not God. and I am not someone who knows everything. I'm just a man with opinions, and if my opinions and any advice I have, whoops, my screensaver fired up there. If my opinions or any advice that I have proves useful to you, then I'm glad it's proven useful. If it doesn't, then that's okay too. You generate your own opinions, and I would like to say as well that as far as my opinions go, I hold no responsibility for any actions that are taken from them. Everybody decides their own fate, and everybody decides what they do with the information they're provided with. So have a think, and I hope this Let's Talk has left you with things to think about and things to consider. Thank you, my friends, for watching. Like, comment and subscribe if you enjoy my content, and let me know if you have ideas for content. This channel is all about you guys. Take care, my friends. I will see you in the next one.